should have brought my coat in. No, thanks. I'm okay.
Gary wants to make an announcement about
Of course.
program at the Interfaith Pantry. You want to do it now?
Yeah, it feels like the air is on, like the air conditioning.
After you get him to attention, Professor.
Just say, attention, everyone. Gary has an announcement.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are now dry. Anyway, there wasn't much publicity for what I'm going to tell you, so I want to make sure everybody knows about it. Tonight at 7 p.m. at the First Christian Church in Studio City is going to be the 44th annual Interfaith Food Pantry service. It's ecumenical. It's a beautiful service with the clergy from all of these different churches and synagogues. It will lift up your spirits incredibly, and it's at 4370 Colfax Avenue in Studio City, the First Christian Church, and I would hope to see that we have a good contingent of people from Adat Ariel and the community there. Thank you very much. 7 p.m.
Moore Park in Colfax. Wow. Okay, everyone. So, yeah.
I know it's freezing in here, and I asked Lourdes to call Patrick to reset the thermostat because it's 65 degrees in here. Thank you.
Yeah. I splurged on the good stuff today. Yeah, that was very good. Okay. So last week we were talking about Morocco. We got on the topic of the Berbers. Show and tell, Evie? Berber beads. Oh, very nice. These are, where did you get them? You got them in Rabat all those years ago when you were there? Wow. You tried to find your notes. And she's an artist, so she drew some of the men that she saw. They were fascinating. They looked like South American men. No, it's okay. Yes, of course. One thing that she was very curious about, I'm repeating it. I'm repeating it. So she met someone in the shoe manufacturing business when you were in Morocco, and he was writing his notes in Hebrew, which is very interesting. Okay, so I did a little research this week on the Berbers, so it was very good. You know, I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know everything about everything, so it's always wonderful when you ask a question and I don't know the answer. I know it's not great for you, you want the answer, but it's great for me. It's like, oh, that's something I don't know about, so I'm going to go learn about it. So now we're going to learn about it. So, the Berbers, this is like really loud. You all, it's perfect? All right. It's loud, yeah. Is this, oh, this is better. This is better. Good. All right. So the Berbers refer, the word Berber refers to not a single group, but many ethnic groups. So the Berbers are comprised of diverse ethnic groups, and they predate the arrival of the Arabs in North Africa. So remember, Islam spreads through the ancient Middle East when? What year? 600, good job. So 600 CE is when Islam spreads through the ancient world. And the Berbers were there in northern Africa long before that. And another word for Berber is Amazigh, and it comes from their language, which is called Tamazight. And each Berber group speaks a slightly different Tamazight language. So they don't have an homogeneous language among all of them. They don't call themselves Berbers or Amazigh. They call themselves by their individual group names. And the word Amazigh was given to them by English people who were analyzing their languages, and they said, well, we'll call them Amazigh, which in their language loosely translates to free people, free people. They are very isolationist. They stay in their own little communities. They don't go out into the world a lot and assimilate a lot. As I said, they have their own languages. And there is some indication that they may be related far, far, far back to ancient Egyptians. Maybe. There is also an Arab philosopher who says they come from Mazigh, who is, according to this Arab philosopher, one of the sons of Canaan. Who is Canaan? He is the son of Ham, who is the son of Noah. So you'll remember Noah had Ham, Japhet, and Shem. Ham, Japhet, and Shem. And Ham had Canaan, and then Canaan had a number of different sons. Biblically, there is no Mazigh, who is the son of Canaan. But he traces, this Arab philosopher traces their lineage back to him. We don't see it anywhere, but this is an Islamic philosopher, medieval Islamic philosopher. Okay, so at the moment, we'll use Berbers just because it's easiest and we know the term. The Berbers live mostly in Morocco, Algeria, and Libya, with some smaller populations in Tunisia, Mauritania, and Mali. Mauritania is just south of Morocco, and they apparently, according to research, descended from Stone Age tribes, from Stone Age North African cultures. So they're very, very old. During the Arab conquests in the 7th and the 8th century, especially the years 642 to 669, this is after the birth of Jesus, so CE, 642, 669, 42 years basically after Muhammad comes on the scene, and Islam is spreading through the ancient world. Islam spreads into Morocco, and the Islamic tribes conquer the Moroccans, the groups that were there at the time. And clearly their language, Arabic, and their religion infiltrated the languages and the religions of the indigenous people. There were many, many Islamic groups that came out of that conquest, but probably the most famous for us as Jews to know about are the Almohads. Apparently, yes. They were Berbers with Arabic and Muslim influence. So, the Almohads, that's a name that you should kind of like have in the back of your head somewhere. They were a very conservative, very strict sect, and this is the group that caused Maimonides to flee, because they invaded Spain, they took over, they invaded Spain, and they introduced very, very fanatical Islam. Remember that under the rules of Islam, Jews were considered protected because Jews were a monotheistic faith, like Islam. And so Islam basically went after pagans and those who were polytheistic, pagans. The Almohads were a very strict, very violent sect, and they did kill Jews, one of the few that did. And so Maimonides fled, and he went to northern Africa for a while. Okay. The Berbers were largely in charge of Morocco until the 16th century, and then they were replaced by the Arabs. So remember, we spoke last week about Berbers and Arabs being different ethnic groups. The Berbers were not Arabs, the Arabs were not Berbers. After the takeover of the Arabs of Morocco, Arabic culture and language and religion infiltrated into the indigenous population of Morocco, but it didn't take over Morocco really until the 16th century. That's the 1500s. Remember, everything changes in the world in the 1500s. It's an incredible time. Today, most Berber men take care of livestock. They export and they work with wool and cotton, and they are primarily responsible for making these beautiful tapestry rugs that are called kilim. If you go to a carpet store here in LA, they are very, very, very expensive rugs, the kilim rugs. Their diet, they love couscous, they like to eat meat pies, and they enjoy bread as well as some other very, very ethnic foods just for them. They, as I said, they live in contained communities. They don't venture out into the outside world much. Their music is mostly what we think of today as Moroccan music. And they participate a lot with the tourist industry of Morocco. In other words, tourists come, they visit, and they are allowed into these communities, clearly to buy their textiles and see what life is like for them. Mother of pearl tables they made, yeah, okay. Politically, if we're thinking about Morocco, this is Africa. So Morocco's here. So Morocco is on the top. Where I have the X is called the Western Sahara. Now, sometimes you'll see in the news, the Western Sahara is the only territory in Africa that doesn't have a self-government. Morocco occupies this much. And then this much is occupied and controlled by the indigenous population, and their group is called Polisario, P-O-L, I-S-A-R-I-O, Polisario. And it stands for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Saguia El Hamra. And the people in this, where the diagonal lines are called the Sahrawi people. And they are basically the representatives of the indigenous population who are fighting for independence from the Moroccans. And Morocco controls, it looks like approximately 3/4 of the land. It's mostly desert, 3/4 of the land, while they control 1/4 of it. So occasionally in the news, you will hear something about Western Sahara and this. Now, it becomes important because as we talk a little bit more about Morocco, we're going to find out that in 2023, Israel recognized Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. So, obviously, it has been a very big discussion internationally, who controls Western Sahara? And Morocco is the primary country that wants it. So the Western Sahara is that area right underneath, right here. All of this. And Morocco controls the western half, the western 2/3. And the Polisario controls the eastern 1/3, something approximately like that. The ones, yes, they are ethnic Berber tribes. Israel has a good relationship with Morocco now, yes, which we're going to talk about, which is why I think, yeah. Okay, right. So last week we left off talking about that many of the Jews who went to Morocco, certainly by the 1930s, lived in sort of the country. Casablanca was probably one of the biggest cities for Jews to live in. Remember, Casablanca is on the northern coast. And in Casablanca, there are 110 synagogues that are, not in Morocco in general. There are 110 synagogues that have been restored, and it is there is a Jewish museum in Casablanca. It's the only Jewish museum in the entire Arab world. Yes. It was a native Moroccan Berber who ran the museum. There was no Jewish presence there. Yes. Where did the Jews come from who moved to Morocco? Some came from Spain later on, but remember we spoke last week that many came after the destruction of the second temple in 70 CE. And they went to a city called Volubilis, which is in the northern. Yes, it was a Roman city. And that makes sense. Why? Because the second temple was destroyed during the Roman period. So there was a Roman city in northern Africa, and that's where many Jews went to. And I told you, there is some archaeological evidence. Thank you. So there's some archaeological evidence that there were Jews there. In other words, potteries with menorah on it, with the menorah on it, as well as gravestones. And then, of course, after the expulsion from Spain in 1492, a number of Jews went as well. You recall from when the Jews were expelled from Spain and Portugal, here's Spain, right? And so where did they go? They went into Europe, and they went into Africa, northern Africa. There were a number of different places where they settled. So during the Middle Ages, the Jews of Morocco were allowed to live in what were called mellahs, M-E-L-L-A-H. A mellah is a ghetto. It's a walled city. And the Jews were confined to their own quarters. Okay, that's not surprising to any of us. And they were, as we spoke about last week, classified as dhimmis, D-H-I-M-M-I-S, second-class citizens. The Muslims left them alone as long as they behaved and they just stayed out of public life in a big way. In other words, if you were a Jew living in Morocco, as long as you went about your daily life and you just sort of kept your mouth quiet and just lived your life quietly, you had no problems. And that was true in most of Muslim lands. You couldn't have large celebrations at the synagogue like Sukkot, Simchat Torah, those kinds of things. No. We just we do that very quietly. We can't build new synagogues or make them very big and beautiful. They had to be very, very subdued. You couldn't, if you were a dhimmi, for instance, you couldn't be riding a horse next to a Muslim who was walking because you were higher than the Muslim. So that was a no-no. And you had to pay a special tax as a Jew called the jizya, J-I-Z-Y-A. And it was a special tax for not fighting in the army. But you weren't allowed to fight in the army. So you weren't allowed to fight in the army, but you had to pay a special tax for not fighting in the army. As long as you paid that tax, basically the Muslim authorities were okay. It's like, we're going to leave the Jews alone. They don't make a problem, You couldn't hold any demonstrations. You couldn't speak out in public. You could, these kinds of things. As long as you minded your own business, you were fine. Unlike in Christian Europe, where there were many riots and pogroms and actions against Jews. So overall, we can say that Jews who were living in Muslim lands in the Middle Ages were a little better off than Jews living in Christian lands under Christianity. You can basically find kosher food in Morocco. I think Joette was telling us.
Yeah, when I was on a Jewish tour, it was all kosher, and there were several kosher restaurants that we went to, and all the patrons were tourists.
Yeah. According to my research, most of those restaurants are, in fact, in Casablanca. There are in other cities, but many, many are in Casablanca. So in December of 2020, Israel established diplomatic relations with Morocco under the Abraham Accords. Does anyone remember who was involved in the Abraham Accords? Say again? So the countries that are involved, yeah, Saudi Arabia is not on board right now. No, they are sorta, kinda, maybe, sorta in discussions. The last I read, Saudi Arabia said they are willing to be on board if there are concrete moves to establish and ensure an independent Palestinian state. If not, they said, we're not even interested. No, we're not doing that. If Saudi Arabia does come on board with the Abraham, it's huge. It's huge, it's huge, it's huge, because they are the biggest player in the Middle East in terms of starting to have all the dominoes fall for establishing peace with Israel. I don't know how Iran will ever, but I don't see that ever happening unless the Ayatollah, unless the Messiah comes, yes, unless the Ayatollah dies and a completely new government takes over. I don't see that happening anywhere. But Saudi Arabia would be a very huge player to come on board for the Abraham Accords. So the United Arab Emirates, okay, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, and Sudan and Morocco came a little bit later. First it was the UAE and Bahrain, and that was a good start. And then Sudan and Morocco, which is why there were so many Jews from Morocco, from a Moroccan lineage, who were living in Israel. And they really, really longed to go back to Morocco to visit and to live. So, starting in 2020, when diplomatic relations were established, many, 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 many Israeli Moroccan Jews went back to Morocco to visit, and there were many regular Israeli citizens who went to Morocco to visit to see Morocco. Half of the people in your tour who were Israelis. Yes, great. And Dubai, sure.
What's interesting about Dubai is the hotels are becoming kosher. There's a lot of tourism that they have brought in, and they're just welcoming the Jews. There's money involved, of course.
And Dubai is you saw a lot of Jews up in the Atlas Mountains. And they were tourists, absolutely, absolutely. Dubai, as many of you know, is a huge international hub. So when I flew to Mauritius 2 years ago, I flew on Emirates. And Emirates is a fantastic airlines to fly. It's a little more expensive, but boy, they take such good care. The seats are big, televisions, I mean, it's a great, if you got to make a long flight, and the flight to Africa is a very long flight, Emirates is a really good airline to fly. And so I had to stop in Dubai. And this was the first time I've ever seen women who were walking around fully in burqas, completely covered. And I just, wow, okay, I read about this. I've seen pictures of this, but I never saw this. They seem to be very happy and content and doing their thing, but it was the first time I'd ever seen it. After the Inquisition, how did they become Europeans? Okay, so does anybody know? How did we get the designations Ashkenazic and Sephardic? So it's very simple, actually. So in German, what was the name of Germany before it was Ashkenaz? It was called Ashkenaz. So German Jews were called Ashkenazic Jews. They went to Eastern Europe, mostly. Sepharad, Spain. Sepharad is Spain. They were Spanish Jews. Many, many, many came down through northern Africa and around up into the Middle East. So it's just a general moniker. Sephardic Jews are Jews from the Iberian Peninsula, generally speaking. Ashkenazic Jews from Germany and eastward, Eastern Europe, Russia, etc. Yes. Yes, in Hungary they did speak Yiddish. All of Eastern Europe spoke Yiddish, and they spoke their native tongue. Yeah, half of my family is Hungarian as well. But that's right. That's why we're related. But nem tedu magyarul. I don't speak Hungarian. When did that distinction start? So it definitely became very pronounced after the expulsion from Spain. Jews who were, and we spoke a little bit about this last week, Jews who were living in Spain were speaking Spanish, and they were speaking Ladino as well, right? Which Ladino is a combination of Spanish with a little bit of Arabic and some other languages, and Hebrew. Yiddish is a combination of German with a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. Yes, Joette?
Both Yiddish and Ladino use the Hebrew alphabet for...
Excellent point. Excellent point. Both Yiddish and Ladino use the Hebrew alphabet. Why is that so important? And that's an excellent, excellent observation. It's so important because Jews who were living under Muslim rule, Jews who were living under Christian rule, could communicate with each other via Hebrew because they all used the same alphabet. Meaning they couldn't speak to each other, but they could communicate to each other in terms of weights and measures and accounts, which is why both the Christian nobility and the Muslim world used the Jews as accounting, as in their commerce. Because the Arabs wouldn't speak to the Christians, and the Christians wouldn't speak to the Arab Muslims. I'm using Arabs interchangeably with Muslim here, and we all understand not all Arabs are Muslims. Most are, but they aren't all. And we just have to keep, every time we hear Arab, it doesn't mean Arab equals Muslim. No. Mostly, but not all. Okay, so the Arab world would not communicate with the Christian world, and the Christian world would not communicate with the Arab world. But they found a group of people, us, who could. They could, our accountants, shall we say, in the Muslim world, could exchange information with our accountants in the Christian world because of the Hebrew, which Joette correctly just pointed out. They could communicate with each other in terms of weights and measures.
I imagine there was another benefit because the Muslims and the Christians couldn't figure out what was in these documents. It could be all kept.
Say that again? Oh, yeah, yes. Well, we didn't, you know, if we were only communicating amongst ourselves, we didn't have to necessarily divulge all the information. We could keep some things secret. I hadn't even thought about that there was that aspect to it. Where did the Jews in Germany come from? Where did the Jews in Europe come from? Mostly after the Jews in Germany, some came from after the expulsion, but many came after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Jewish world became much, much, much bigger. If you think about this, so let's say in the 600s BCE, so you had King David, then you had Solomon, then you had a number of kings. Probably the most prominent was Hezekiah, Josiah. All Jews lived in what we now call Israel. I mean, the entire kingdom was Jews. After the destruction of the first temple, after the destruction of Solomon's temple, and the exiles went into Babylonia, then there was some movement outside of Israel. We were the majority population in our kingdom for a long time, hundreds of years. And then the expulsion came. We moved, some of the Jews went to Babylonia, and then the Israelites were allowed to come back. Many Jews stayed in Iraq, in what is now Iraq, what was then Babylonia, because it was a better life. It was more fertile. It was wonderful. You know, what we consider, what those of you who have been to Israel know. If you go to Jerusalem and south of Jerusalem, it's not a hospitable place. It's not wonderful. The north is really nice. I mean, there's greenery. It's good for growing. Jerusalem and south is not like wonderful. It's hot. It's hot and it's really dry. And it's desert. So those Jews who were expelled came from the kingdom of Judah in the south. And they left, they went to Iraq, and then they were allowed to go back. And they said, well, I don't think I want to go back. I don't think I want to go back to that desert. No, thanks, I'll stay here. It's really nice here. Just like, as we spoke about a number of times, when the State of Israel was established in 1948, and the thought was many American Jews, lots of American Jews, would flock to Israel because it is their homeland, because it is the Jewish homeland. And the American Jews said, I don't think so. Not so much. Not so much, not so much. Thank you. We support the homeland. We do, but we're not going there. And that was sort of a surprise. Many did. You're right. Many did, but not like what was thought. American Jews said we like America. We're not going there. Half of your family went to Israel? And are they still there now? Wonderful, wonderful. Your whole family, everybody's there in Israel. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I went to a board of rabbis luncheon yesterday, and the head of the board of rabbis brought up a very interesting subject, and he said, we're kind of stuck in the middle as Jews right now, anti-Semitism on the left, anti-Semitism on the right, and what are we supposed to do? And the idea of supporting Israel came up, and there was at least one rabbi in the group who was furious, and he said, "Support Israel? Are you kidding? You would think we would, but look at the atrocities that are going on, the terrible things that are going on." And he was threatened online by some other rabbis who were kicked out of the rabbinical assembly, and it was a whole big thing. And so I have spoken a number of times about my own feeling, which is I absolutely support Israel's mission statement to be a homeland for the Jews, absolutely 100%, 100%. I support the idea that our people need to have a place to live in peace without fear. I don't agree with every decision that Netanyahu and the government makes. That doesn't make me a bad Jew. It just means I don't like every decision that they've made, because we all look at the TV and we all feel, as I hope we all feel as Jews, the optics are just awful, awful. Nobody wants to see little children dying. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see that. And it just makes us look terrible in the world. And we are in a time right now where we do look terrible to the world. Everybody hates us now. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. You encounter so much garbage. You moved in on Christmas Day. One of your neighbors was so angry at you, she came out of her house, semi-drunk. And when your daughter was born, you walked her down the street. They were discussing membership in the country club. Okay. This woman whose husband was in the Hitler Youth, we didn't invite you because they don't accept Jews. Yeah, I think we've all experienced this. We all know. I live in Burbank, and in the 1950s, there were signs on the, I am told, I wasn't born yet, but there were signs on the lawn saying no Jews, no blacks allowed. There was a synagogue in the 50s, probably Temple Emmanuel. Yeah, it's still there. It's still there. Oh, Rabbi Kramer? No, that was Beth Emet. That was Beth Emet. You're not learning. Yeah. Yep. Anyway, so the point is, I think if we're all intelligent adults and we look at the news and we're horrified. There are very decent Palestinian mothers and fathers and men. I mean, that's just how it is. There are some awful, horrible Palestinian men, Hamas. But, I mean, as mothers and fathers, every time we see a little child hurt, I mean, it just kills us. It hurts us. It hurts our hearts. So all I'm saying is, it's okay to support Israel in every way possible and not agree with the decisions of the IDF or Netanyahu. That's okay. That doesn't make you a bad Jew. One thing that bothers you personally is the attacks by the right-wing Israelis. Absolutely. The attack by the right-wing settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank. Terrible. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. Why can't the Israeli army stop it? I'm not sure they want to. I'm not sure they want to stop it. Judaism does not have fundamentalists. Judaism does not have fundamentalists. So, what is a fundamentalist? A fundamentalist is someone who believes in the words of our Bible and only the words of our Bible, word for word for word. Okay? The Orthodox and the Hasidic groups in Judaism are not N-O-T fundamentalists. They all of them go by what the rabbis interpret the Torah to mean. They don't go by the exact words of the Torah. Absolutely not. The only groups that we could say are kind of fundamentalists are the Karaites, the Samaritans, and the settlers in the West Bank. They are fundamentalists, and they have, I think, caused Israel a great deal of harm and pain. A great deal of harm and pain. So that's really terrible. Okay, I want to end today with a little teaching theologically, because I think it's really important. It came up again in my congregation the other day, and it's just very important. We talked about it last year at one point. So the idea is, in Judaism, we bless God for the good things that happen to us and to the world, and we bless God for the terrible things that happen. And of course, the question last year was, how could we bless God for terrible things? What are you talking about? Why would we bless God for an earthquake? Why would we bless God for a tsunami? Why would we bless God for the death of our loved ones? Why? That doesn't make any sense. So the prayer that we say when we bless God for something terrible is Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. And when we tear the Kriya ribbon at the funeral, we say, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed are you, God, who is the true judge. And then we say, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Both of them are from Job. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So the way the rabbis will explain it in terms of theology is that, well, we believe that God always has the best interests in mind. And we don't understand how terrible things happen, but we affirm our belief that God is good and that God always has the best in mind. We don't know God's intentions, and we're far, far, far too away, we are too far away from God to understand God's plans. So what might look to us as something terrible might not be that way to God. All right. I don't know if that works for all of you. It doesn't work for me. So let me explain to you historically, academically. You don't find this in the Talmud because the rabbis aren't going to tell you this. But so the exiles returned from Babylonia around 538 BCE. They were in Babylonia for 40-something years. What did they experience in Babylonia? What did they come in contact with? They came in contact with the Babylonian religion. The Babylonian religion at the time was Zoroastrianism, and is still a minority religion in Iraq, Zoroastrianism. In Iran as well, thank you. And what does Zoroastrianism say? Zoroastrianism says there is a good God in the heavens. His name is Ahura Mazda, and he controls all of creation and all of the wonderful things that happen in the world. And then there is a lesser demigod who is responsible for all the evil in the world and responsible for the evil in the material world where we live. And it was how the Zoroastrians explained how does a good God create and allow evil into the world. Well, there's a lesser God, and he is responsible for all of the evil in the world. Okay, and now we say, oh, okay, now I get it. I understand. There's a good God and there's a kind of an evil God, and the evil God creates all the bad stuff for us. Okay, that makes sense. And that dual cosmology was brought back by the Babylonian exiles. They had been exposed to it. It crept into early Christianity, into Gnosticism, and in fact, the Marcion heresy. Marcion was a Christian cleric in the very, very early centuries. And he said, the good God is Jesus, and the bad God is the God of the Old Testament, our God, the Jewish God. It was a heresy, and it was thrown out of Christianity, but it was kept in Gnosticism. So, if we have a good God in the heavens and a lesser God responsible for evil, we get it. That could not exist in Judaism. Could not happen. Why? Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. God is one. And if we look at Lamentations, and we look at Isaiah 45, Deutero-Isaiah writing during the Babylonian exile, they both say God is responsible for good and evil. That creates a huge problem, huge theological problem for us. We've talked about this a number of times. How does a good God create evil? Why? How come he can't get rid of it? Okay. The problem for the rabbis was they were competing with Zoroastrianism, and they saw a dual cosmology. They didn't want anything that smacked of the idea that another God was creating evil in the world. So we say Baruch Dayan HaEmet, because God must be responsible for both good and evil. It can't possibly be that if we don't say Baruch Dayan HaEmet, what does that mean? It means we only bless God for the good. And it means then that something else, someone else, some entity, some God, something is responsible for the evil that happens in our world. And Judaism could absolutely not support that. Good. Okay. And so we bless God, Baruch Dayan Emet, the God of truth. And maybe the truth isn't evil. So, what the rabbis will say is what we see as evil may not, in fact, be evil to God. Right? And the rabbis all throughout the Talmud will point out God is good. We don't know God's reasons. We can't see what God sees. God's years are different from our years. We only see with our tiny, finite human brains. God's brain is infinite. And we don't have the capabilities to understand why God does what God does. And I will tell you, academically, the rabbis were very concerned with Zoroastrianism, as they were with Christianity, right? What did Jesus promise? Jesus promised a wonderful life in the hereafter. What was Jesus all about? Love and caring and forgiveness. Our God absolutely had love and caring and forgiveness, but what else does our God have? Our God has justice. Our God punishes terribly when we transgress. People didn't want that kind of God. So when Christianity came along, they were like, let me see, Judaism, love, forgiveness. I think I'm going to this. And there were lots of Jews who were going this way. That's why we have the Birkat Haminim, right? Added to the Shemona Esrei to make 19 benedictions. Because who were the Haminim? In this case, they were the Nazarenes. They were the Jews who were following Jesus. And so the rabbis saw a number of different other traditions they were competing with. And so our God had to be responsible for both good and evil, and we therefore had to bless God for the good and bless God for the evil, for the bad, even though we don't understand it. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful week. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Hello, hello, hello. Somebody left a calculator in the ladies' restroom. Any? What? Little mini calculator in the ladies' room. Anybody own it? Well, yeah, it's one of the old-fashioned ones. Nothing fancy. Well, hopefully.
All right, folks. Does everybody have their wonderful little snacks? Ladies, if I could please ask you to come and sit down. Yeah. And that's part of what MID getting together is all about, right? It's about learning, but it's also about community and being able to talk to one another. So that's wonderful. And I would like to begin by asking us to join together in the blessing for learning. The last three words of that are la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I will repeat it for people who haven't been at MID in previous years. The way I used to remember it was la'asok, to soak yourself, to immerse yourself in learning. So la'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So I was in the back listening to the end of your class, your last class, and I was wondering if the rabbi had mentioned why we include God in both good and evil. Any ideas before we go on with pirates who are good and evil at the same time? So I just want to ask you to add the idea that the reason that God is all-encompassing of good and evil is because of us. Because God gave us what? Free will. So did Rabbi talk about that? So it's a good explanation of why all these things are encompassed besides the fact that we only have one God. It's also because God needed to give us space to make free will choices. And some of the times that we make free will choices, they're not so hot, right? But if you are creating human beings who actually have the right to thought and creativity, that's what God had to do. And in order to do that, it couldn't happen from another being. God needed to encompass everything and deal with it. So I loved what he was talking about, and it just brought to my mind that idea with regard to our possibilities. So in which case, this is what I'd like to ask you for today. We've been dealing with talking about a number of really rather upstanding, in many ways, Jewish men who came from various different places, but specifically and initially from Spain or from other countries that were taken over by the Inquisition. And we've already talked about the fact that the reason that they went and did piracy, I see that Cecil's not here today, but he would say it's not necessarily piracy, it's also all different kinds of names, whether the government hires you to do something or you do it on your own or whatever. But we know, and today we're going to encounter another very important man, but this is what I want to ask you. If you were living at that time, and you were feeling that Spain had destroyed not only actual lives, but heritages of Jewish communities and lives that had to flee during that period of time. And if you knew that the Inquisition followed people from country to country to country, what would you feel about the way that you would be able to, let's say you're an individual, strong person, what way would you be able to show that you were unwilling to allow Spain to do that? How do you feel about these guys who decided that they were going to be involved either in governments making them be involved in piracy, or giving them that opportunity, or them individually? Like, how do you think about that? What would you want to do?
I always like to look at history, and I study history and how.
Do you want to come up here and say it? Thank you. It makes it easier than me repeating
it.
Yeah.
And it's so, I always look at history as something that really should mirror what we see now. And as far as I'm concerned, what I'm learning now about the pirates, and I missed last week, sorry, but I kind of look at it as what the rabbi was talking about just before, how horrible it is to see the babies being killed and innocent people being killed. And there are reasons for, one could give reasons for every action of the IDF. One could give reasons for why Netanyahu is making the decisions, why the right-wing people are feeling how they feel. And so I'll try to make it more concise, but the way that I look at it is, even for these people, there are reasons why they did it. I don't feel I have it within myself to judge them harshly. I don't know if I would do it myself, but, and in certain cases I may aid them, but I don't know if I would do it, but I certainly would not judge them at all.
Thank you. Anybody else have any viewpoints on this? I can't hear you, but. Mm-hmm. Your viewpoint comes as a woman. A woman in ancient times had no control. So, just so that I can add a little bit here that maybe goes beyond piracy or goes beyond the time of the Inquisition, if you take a look at the Mishnah, which is the first rabbinic set of documents, set of learning that we have that came before the Talmud, women in Judaism had a lot of individual rights. So, for example, if a woman wanted to have a business, she could do so. If she wanted to hold on to her funds individually, she could do so. And unlike other periods of time, because we are talking about something that happened in the 1st century of the Common Era, and we are in which century of the Common Era? 21st. Yeah. So it's 2025. So, yes. So, so if we're talking about the year 1 or the year 2, this is pretty amazing. In addition to that, if husbands wanted to move somewhere or go somewhere or be involved in some kind of business, and it was going to take a woman away from where she was used to living, she had the opportunity to say no. In addition to that, she, unlike other women in that period of time, could decide whether they wanted to marry somebody or not. And so Jewish law was obviously not as open for women as we thankfully have now. However, it was way, way, way better. Oh, right. Thank you for bringing up the ketubah. When women got married, we got a ketubah. So if you have one, it still has in Aramaic that all the different kinds of things that your upcoming spouse needs to be aware of with regard to treating you. So, you're right. There was a lot less strength, or a lot less, a lot less opportunity for women in like the 1500s, but Jewish law was very different than others.
But women were subject to the country that they lived in, and the country's laws were prohibited.
Women were in different kinds of countries, and the country's laws also determined what they would do. So, yes, kind of. Kind of. I mean, if we even take a look at biblically, there were a lot of women who were very strong Jewish women who saved, well, let's talk about Yael, who slaughtered, yeah. Well, go ahead. You say it.
I can't bring you all the way.
Yeah, Elle was a, oh, this is so, can we try the other one? They're getting a lot of feedback. Thank you. Yeah, Elle was a biblical hero who enticed, what was his name?
I forgot.
Yeah, the leader of the enemy.
Leader, yeah.
And she enticed him into her tent and gave him food and drink and
He got drowsy.
yeah, and enough so that he fell asleep, and she took a tent pin and smashed it through his head.
So I'm not going to give you, you ladies, that much leeway. I'm asking you, how would you feel if you lived in that time? And it's a little bit like, how do you feel in this time? What kind of strength can you bring? And do you blame the pirates?
I would never join the pirates. I would never recommend the pirates. But on the other hand, I think a part of me thinks that it might have been necessary for some people to do that. but I would never want to be involved in that.
You're going to find out something very interesting today when we talk about Moses Cohen Enriquez. So you wanted to say something.
I would feel the same way as the Jewish people who were partisans against the Nazis. It was necessary that they sabotage anything they could, and the pirates we're talking about were targeting mainly Spain.
Yes. It was definitely mainly Spain. So now let me lead you in. This is the one that's back. Now let me lead you into Moses Cohen Enriquez. It's just the way it is. Just set it down and it'll be okay. He was a Dutch pirate of Portuguese Sephardic origin, Jewish origin, operating as a pirate of the Caribbean. The total haul of his raids on the Spanish is estimated to be about $1 billion in today's value. So, he was absolutely successful. Enriquez was born in the late 16th century to a Portuguese converso family, and you know what that means. They escaped religious persecution and immigrated to Amsterdam, whereupon they resumed their free practice of their Jewish faith. So what he did when he was in Amsterdam is he served under the Dutch naval officer and folk hero, Admiral Pieter Zoon Hein of the Dutch West India Company. Do you know what the Dutch West India Company is? Okay, so let me share a little bit, because he was a Dutch naval officer, but he worked for the Dutch West India Company, which was not in itself a military group, but rather a company founded in 1621 and defunct in 1792. It had created a charter, a monopoly for trade in the Dutch West Indies. So this is what the Dutch West India Company did. They shipped slaves. They created a possibility for farmers and soldiers to get from one place to the other. And when they did all of that, they took on, in trading, salt, beaver skins, silver, sugar, tobacco, coffee, and their route was West Indies to the Americas. So you can imagine how widespread their reach was, and that's who he chose to work for. Now, with regard to the slavery part of it, I think that we all know that many, many, many different companies and ships and that kind of thing, unfortunately, transferred slaves. But the Dutch West India Company, while being one of those, was also involved in a number of other things. So he rose in the ranks to become the right-hand man of this guy, and he aided in the capture of a Spanish treasure fleet in the Battle of the Bay of Manzanas off the Cuban coast during the 80 Years' War in 1628. Well, I didn't know what the 80 Years' War was. So, do you? So it literally was an 80 Years' War of armed conflict between the Netherlands and groups of rebels and the Spanish government from 1568 to 1648, literally an 80-year war. So part of the Spanish fleet in Venezuela had been warned because a Dutch cabin boy had lost his way on an island and was captured, betraying the plan, but the other half from Mexico continued its voyage unaware of the threat. 16 Spanish ships were intercepted. 1 galleon was taken after a surprise encounter during the night. 9 smaller merchants were talked into a surrender. 2 small ships were taken at sea fleeing, and 4 fleeing galleons were trapped on the Cuban coast in the Bay of Manzanas. After a number of volleys of muskets from the Dutch, the crews of all of these ships surrendered, and that's when the Dutch captured 11,509,524 Dutch guilders of booty in gold, silver, and other expensive trade goods. So, the next thing you need to know about this whole thing, when they were collecting so much and so many ships and made them stop and made them come to grips with the fact that they were being stolen, the Dutch did this without any bloodshed. They didn't take any prisoners, and they gave Spanish crews ample supplies for a march to Havana. Why did they do that? They did that because of Moses Cohen Enriquez. There was a very big discussion during that period of time about whether people who also represented the company would then take the lives of the people who were on those ships. And he was the one who told them that that was not the way to do this. And it wasn't their fault. And they should let them get home one way or the other. So that's one of the reasons I selected him. Because, not just because he was able to collect more than $1 billion during his time being a pirate, but because he represented an ethic that really comes out of our tradition. And I think that that's really significant and something to learn about with regard to this guy, but also should be a part of your thought about these pirates. So, anyway, after the war, he scouted the Portuguese colony of, I can't pronounce this very well, but some of you might, probably Rosalie, Pernambuco. There you go, on the Brazilian coast. He did this as a spy in preparation for a Dutch invasion. He then went on to lead a Jewish contingent in Brazil as part of the invasion in 1630. He led a force of 3,000 men, 3,000 Jewish men, capturing the colony and turning it into a refuge for Jews during the subsequent Dutch rule. That's pretty amazing. I mean, before I started preparing for this class, I had no idea about these guys, except for that I knew that, these pirates existed. But when you take a look at many of these guys that we've already talked about, the question of ethics, despite trying to get back at the Spaniards, is huge. Sorry, it's on the Brazilian coast. Pardon? I don't know, why don't you look it up? I looked up a whole bunch of things, but not where Pernambuco was. Yes?
Clarifying in my mind. I'm clarifying in my mind. Okay, I know that it was originally the Portuguese that had Okay, I keep doing that. Sorry. Okay, I know that the Portuguese originally had Brazil, and this is when it became under Dutch rule was because of the Jews,
Not all of it,
but he had a large part.
he had a part in
And then ultimately, the Portuguese got it back. Yeah, and a very interesting story is how the one ship, they were leaving, when the Portuguese took it back, there was a whole host of Jews that went back to Amsterdam at that time.
Yeah, you're taking away my.
I'll leave that wonderful story to you.
No, you can tell the story.
Okay, as I understand the story, there's various versions. There's these, when the Portuguese took over Brazil again, there was, I think, about 20 ships that went back to Amsterdam. One of the ships got attacked by pirates, not necessarily Jewish ones, I hope. Anyway, and they lost all their goods, and they were sort of stranded. But another ship came by, a French ship, or at least had a French captain, and they said, well, if you take us to Amsterdam, we have people who will pay you. Problem is, he took them to the wrong Amsterdam. He took them to New Amsterdam, where there was nobody to pay off the French captain. And that's how we all ended up in New York. Okay, now the interesting part of this.
Now we're done. Yes.
Okay, Pernambuco. Yeah, what's going on with, oh, can you hear me now? No, no, no? No. Okay, well, it's in the, if you look at a map of Brazil, it's in the northeast portion of that large country, and Rabbi's going to talk about Recife. That's a large city in Pernambuco.
So, I told you about the fact that he took 3,000 men and turned it into a refuge for Jews where he was. So he was the uncle of somebody named Jacob Cohen, a financial advisor and personal secretary to Count Maurice of Nassau. Nassau in, well, we'll get there. And on the 9th of February in 1634, he wrote a letter to the Dutch West India Company in Amsterdam applying for permission to bring the first large organized group of Sephardi colonists to the Dutch colony in Brazil. The group arrived in 1635 and settled on the island of Itamaraca. So you're much better at this than me, Rosalie, with regard. Okay, so I think that what I want you to get from this is that this particular family worked together in such a way that they were able to create safety, at least for a while, from a huge part of Jewish community that was fleeing from one place to the other. Enriquez was instrumental in bringing a rabbi to the Dutch colony. Isaac Aboab de Fonseca, as well as building a mikveh and a synagogue, Kahal Tzor Yisrael synagogue in Recife, and all firsts for the New World. However, this is the discussion, in 1654, so in 1634, they created all of this, and in 1654, the Portuguese recaptured the nascent colony in the northern coast of Brazil, forcing Enriquez and other Jews to flee from religious persecution yet again. Is that when the Inquisition came in? Yes. Aboab then returned to Amsterdam, but members of his community emigrated by choice and some not by choice to North America, and were among the founders of New Amsterdam, which was the Dutch settlement. I'm going to. I'm turning a page. It was the Dutch settlement, New Amsterdam, that was at the tip of what is now Manhattan. Some people say that New Amsterdam is all of the area around Manhattan, but it is not the case. It was a very small area. And in 1655, his brother, Jacob Cohen, who had helped to create a sense of freedom for Jewish people before the Portuguese came back in, he too lived in Manhattan. Yes, you wanted to say something? Some of the Jews remained in Recife. They reclaimed open Jewishness when they were able to, but a lot of people left and went other places. Recife actually was thought of as, through history, not just as a place where people went for safety from the Inquisition, but there are a lot of books and histories written about Recife, Brazil, because we really wouldn't have any Jewish presence in what became America if it weren't for the fact that they were living in Recife before that, as you mentioned. So how are we so far? It's interesting, right? Like what they did. So after the Portuguese Empire recaptured northern Brazil in 1654, Moses Cohen Enriquez fled South America, and in order to survive difficult times, he ended up as a trusted advisor of somebody who you might know the name of if you think about pirates, Henry Morgan. Have you ever heard his name? Who was the leading pirate of the time. So Moses Cohen Enriquez became part of Henry Morgan's piracy in a very, very high level. He established his own pirate island off the Brazilian coast in order to take revenge against the Spanish and the Portuguese. That was also extremely important because Jews were able to come to that island and be safe. Even though his role as a pirate was disclosed during the Portuguese Inquisition and the Spanish Inquisition, as he was active in the Caribbean against Spain and in Brazil against Portugal, Moses Cohen Enriquez was never caught, never faced trial, even though the Inquisition sought to capture him for years and years and years. After the English conquest of Jamaica, Enriquez migrated to the island, where he helped establish the Jewish community in Jamaica. Morgan became governor of Jamaica and gave Enriquez a full pardon in 1681 so that nobody could ever come after him ever again. So I don't know who knows pop music here or different kinds of reggae music, but Moses Cohen is the great-great-great-grandfather of a Jamaican dance hall singer named Sean Paul. So if you were... What? It wasn't me, right. So obviously he's still alive. But I thought that maybe you would be kind of interested in what happened in Jamaica. So, anybody been to Jamaica? Okay. Have you done a lot of Jewish history in Jamaica? So there is a lot of Jewish history in Jamaica. So I thought that maybe I would share it with you today, if that's okay. In Kingston, there's a spooky Hunts Bay Cemetery, located in a shanty town near the Red Stripe Brewery, if you're ever going there. Tramping through high grass with a dozen fellow travelers, the person who wrote a particular article passed a herd of cattle that was being pecked by wild egrets before finding what they were looking for, the additional engraved tombstones with Hebrew benedictions on them in Kingston. Centuries ago, coffins buried here were ferried across the Caguay Bay from Port Royal, once known as the wickedest city in the world, and an inspiration for the Pirates of the Caribbean movie franchise and the amusement park ride. Have you ever been on that? So the town that they have in the Disneyland amusement park ride is Port Royal. And in Port Royal, it was the domain of little-known Jewish pirates who once sailed the waters of Jamaica. So that's where their hangout is. So next time, if you ever go to Disneyland again and you get on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride with whoever it is that you're going with, you need to wave to Port Royal, home of the Jewish pirates. What? I said the last time I went to Disneyland was 40 years ago. Well, you never know when grandchildren or friends or something like that might want to go, and so then you can go on that ride and say, "Jews lived here."
Those pirates were Jews.
Not all of them. Their history captures a different side of the island than its recently adopted tourism slogan, Jamaica, get all right, because the Jews had a very difficult time getting things all right everywhere in the area, let alone Jamaica. So here's the interesting part as well. Jews have been a recognized part of Jamaican cultural life since 1655, when Britain took power from Spain and welcomed Jewish immigration, though some date their presence here to Columbus' second voyage to the Americas. And don't worry, we're going to be doing Columbus pretty darn soon. So, many were successful gold traders and sugar merchants there, and some, like Moses Cohen Enriquez, the crony of Captain Henry Morgan, who once plundered the modern-day equivalent, as we know, from a Spanish galleon of more than $1 billion, were marauding buccaneers. Though today's Jamaican Jewish population is fewer than, what would you guess? 20? How many? A couple hundred. You're right. It's fewer than 200. There are at least, tell me how many burial grounds you think that there are that are Jewish burial grounds there. 2? Anybody else? Huh? 5. 21. So it lets you know exactly what the population was and the people who lived there safely in Jamaica were over this period of time. What happened to the one? So they cooperated with other, with the Dutch. Money got spread out over a number of things, but a bunch of money that the Cohens held onto with the permission of the other people that they were working with, helped Jewish communities who needed to flee to get resettled. So it was over several months of several years of collecting that amount of money. I don't think that either he or his brother became financiers. I think that from what we heard, you knew that their major hope and responsibility was to keep people safe. Yes? Yes, they do still have a synagogue there. That's good. So there's a woman named Anna Ruth Henriquez, who's a descendant of Moses Cohen Henriquez, and the daughter of Ainsley Henriquez, the paterfamilias of Jumation life, they said. They launched a Jamaica Jewish tour company. And the company shows people all the different places where Jews lived in Jamaica and live in Jamaica, and tell about the Semitic history. So should you ever go on a cruise that includes Jamaica, because of the Cohen family, you would be able to learn a great deal more about what goes on in their community. There is a formerly owned Appleton rum distillery and sugar plantations and all different kinds of things that Jewish people were and are still involved in the community. So we're almost done with this, but let's talk a little bit about Rastafarianism. Anybody know about Jamaican music and reggae music? And so for some, heritage in Jamaica might be synonymous with Rastafarianism. In fact, it is inextricably intertwined with Judaism. The religion's Messiah, the Ethiopian emperor, what's his name? Haile Selassie, who was the head from 1930 to 1974. He claimed that he was a descendant of who? King Solomon, and shares symbols like the Lion of Judah and have kosher laws in the community that still exists. And it shares symbols like the Lion of Judah and great huts at an eco-resort near Port Antonio is built on this twin heritage. It's run by a person who's a Jewish doctor from Brooklyn, and it combines Judaic and Afrocentric qualities in its design and amenities, such as a kosher kitchen, and offers educational tours, etc. The person who wrote about the tourism said, if Jamaica were to become a second tropical Jewish homeland, and he wrote, after Florida, of course, the obvious capital would be Port Royal, which sits at the end of a long isthmus across from Kingston. And in the 17th century, as I told you, it was the center of Jewish life on the island. But what I didn't tell you about Port Royal is that it had a synagogue. It had a central thoroughfare called Jews Street. And nothing happened except for a natural disaster when it was destroyed in 1692 by an earthquake. So the Moses Cohen Enriquez legacy goes a lot longer than his time of life. And one of the things that's really interesting about all this piracy is that there are families who still exist in these communities who are related, as I told you today, to his family, who's related to him. And many of them did not know anything about what their heritage, what the people who came before them were involved in, and how much, even though they were stealing money from Spain, they were committed to doing good for people in their heritage who were being persecuted. So, what? What? Yes.
The recent hurricane that hit Jamaica about a month ago totally devastated the western half of this country, including its major tourist site, Montego Bay. Very few tourists ever go up to Kingston because there aren't many sights to see there, and also it has a high crime rate.
So the other thing that you should know is that right when that happened, Israel sent 40 medics to go there to be able to be a help. They went to Haiti also. They go everywhere, but they just went there. But let me share with you the sad aspect of that. After the Israelis got there and were needed there, people around the world started writing things unfortunately on Instagram, things like that, or TikTok, saying, oh, the Israelis only went there so that they could harvest people's innards or parts of them. So, yeah. So, all of these horrible myths that came about 500 years ago or something like that are things that people like to use now, and it's horrible. So we all know that they go there with because they feel that their ethics are that they have to help people who are in need, and which is really, really something when they're at war. And they send people to help other people around the world, which is what they do. So that's it for today.
They have the skills of working in difficult situations.
Pardon?
They have the skills.
They have the skill at working in difficult situations. They've been, well, I don't know what they've been able to do here in Jamaica, but in other places they have helped to dig people up who are still alive from underground because they're used to trying to do that, and helping with medical things. Yeah. So I would like to just give honor to these people. I think that that's why we're studying them. They're a very good way of remembering what value systems are all the way through time, and reminding us to be strong. That's it for today. If anybody wants to know what he looks like, here he is.
Interesting.
Because he doesn't have his pirate hat on.
Right. Is that the Captain Morgan with the rum? I'm sorry.
He's real.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.